The Tower of Terror.
The Tower of Terror.
Twilight Zone Tower of Terror.
You are about to watch one of the most interesting Tower of Terror documentaries you've ever seen. And in just a moment, you're going to be thrilled. You have entered the Twilight Zone.
The Twilight Zone Tower of Terror has been terrifying Disney guests for over 30 years. Today, we are going to look at the ride's legendary history and the changes made to every version of the ride around the globe. Before the glitz and the glamour of Sunset Boulevard and the illustrious Hollywood Tower Hotel, Disney Imagineers had other concepts in mind for a Disney drop ride. One being Geyser Mountain, a drop tower themed to a mine shaft in the Old West. The ride would have been located in Frontierland near Big Thunder Mountain. Another concept that was thrown around was that of a drop ride themed to Jules Verne's Journey to the Center of the Earth. This attraction would have been added to Paris Disneyland, at the time Euro Disney. It is important to note that both of these attractions would have likely used the Intamin first-gen drop tower ride system, however, we'll get to that later. In 1989, Disney-MGM Studios became the third theme park to open at the Walt Disney World Resort, and it celebrated all things Hollywood. The park opened with just 2 rides, the now defunct Studio Backlot Tour and the defunct Great Movie Ride. While the park featured other offerings such as shows and live performances, there was a distinct lack of thrilling rides. However, that would soon change. In 1991, Disney formally announced that production had begun on a new revolutionary attraction. In its early stages of development, Imagineers were challenged to find a suitable theme for the ride. One theme that was heavily considered was a Munsters-themed attraction narrated by Mel Brooks. Sometime within this period, Disney acquired the rights to the classic anthology series The Twilight Zone, created and hosted by Rod Serling. Imagineers decided to create a ride based around this TV show. The attraction story would revolve around a lost episode of The Twilight Zone that took place in a hotel from the golden age of Hollywood, in which 5 people entered the hotel's elevator on a stormy Halloween night. The elevator would be struck by lightning, and the 5 guests were never seen again. Imagineers put in the utmost effort to develop the attraction's elaborate story. The ride's pre-show was directed by Joe Dante, known for directing The Gremlins, and the ride's queue is generously decorated with authentic antiques from the time period. However, a Twilight Zone themed attraction could not be complete without its host, Rod Serling. The problem was, Serling had passed away nearly 20 years earlier. So, old footage of Rod Serling from the Twilight Zone episode It's a Good Life was retrofitted into the ride's pre-show.
Tonight's story on the Twilight Zone is somewhat unique and calls for a different kind of introduction. This, as you may recognize, is a map of the United States.
Tonight's story on the Twilight Zone is somewhat unique and calls for a different kind of introduction. This, as you may recognize, is a maintenance service elevator.
Finally, Imagineers had to find someone who sounded exactly like Rod Serling who could narrate both the pre-show and the attraction. After a series of auditions, voice actor Mark Silverman was cast as the voice of Rod Serling.
So he called me and he goes, "Hey, my agents, they're looking for a Rod Serling voice for a Twilight Zone ride." And I thought, what? How do you Twilight Zone ride at Disney World? It was very confusing to me. I had never been to Disney-MGM Studios at that time. So I thought they need a Rod Serling voice. Interesting. So I drove to Beverly Hills and just auditioned for this woman. And these things are so hard to get, you know. So I auditioned and didn't really think much about it. And then 2 weeks later, this woman left a message on my answer machine, and I still have the recording. She goes, "Hi, Mark." She goes, "Remember that thing you came in for, Rod Serling? Well, it didn't die, and they want to see you at Disney Imagineering." Now, being such a Disney fan, I wasn't even thinking about the audition. I just said, wow, I get to go into Imagineering. I never even been in there. That sounds fantastic. So that's how that started.
I mean, Rod Serling's voice is very iconic. It's very distinct and recognizable. So, I mean, how did you study and like what kinds of things did you do to actually perfect his voice?
Well, I'll tell you what's interesting about that. I just happened to luck out where my own voice would be able to sound like Rod Serling. This is Rod Serling with the Twilight Zone. It wasn't like a big leap. I didn't have to change my voice all that much. So that was a very important part of the whole process. But I would watch Twilight Zone, and there was one book about Twilight Zone. It had every episode. So I would look up what episode it was going to be, and it had the monologues of each episode in the book. And then I would read the monologue with Rod Serling. I mean, I cared that much.
The next major challenge was to create the ride vehicle and drop profiles. Imagineers turned their heads to the Otis Elevator Company, which is the largest manufacturer of elevators in the world. Otis provided custom-made elevators for the attraction, and for the horizontal movement in the fifth dimension scene came the development of the Automated Guided Vehicle, or AGV. These ride vehicles were equipped with sensors underneath them which followed a wire hidden beneath the floor. If at any point the ride vehicle went off course, the vehicles had to be manually corrected. Now came the highlight of the attraction, the drop. Originally, the elevators were supposed to drop at freefall speeds. However, Imagineers felt that the elevators were not moving fast enough to deliver the desired sensation. Two motors the size of a school bus were added to the top of each drop shaft, which helped the elevator accelerate during the drop sequence, and a system of cables were made to pull each elevator down faster than the speed of gravity at 39 miles per hour. Finally, after nearly 4 years of development, on July 22, 1994, Sunset Boulevard and the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror were opened to the public.
It was everything you could imagine it would be.
The ride was an instant hit and almost immediately cemented itself as a Disney classic. The Tower of Terror opened with one drop and only a lap bar securing guests in their elevator. The ending projection of the ride in this original drop sequence was also different, as it featured a staticky TV screen and a silhouette of Rod Serling while he gave the closing spiel. This original version of the Tower of Terror was called Tower 1. In 1995, less than a year later, the drop profile was updated to the Tower of Terror Twice the Fright. This drop sequence featured 3 drops, 2 small drops in the dark, hence the name, then a rise to the top of the tower, with a final drop to the bottom. This version also updated the ending projection of the ride to the modern day version that is still used today. The next sequence came in 1996, which added a 4th drop that rose and fell without stopping, making it the first yo-yo drop in the ride's history. This sequence would remain until 1999, where the first modern drop sequence was added. Fear Every Drop. This sequence features 5 drops and still can be experienced today. Then, in late 2002, the randomized drop sequences were introduced. The Tower of Terror's updated computer now randomly chose one of 4 drop sequences. Along with these updated drops came the removal of the ride's lap bar in favor of the seatbelt still used today. In 2001, Disney California Adventure opened at the Disneyland Resort in Anaheim. The park was predicted to perform so well in its opening year that it would cause Disneyland tickets to see a slump in sales. However, not only did the park not outperform Disneyland, but it was a colossal failure, with only 20% of guests feeling satisfied with their experience. In its opening year, DCA only had 5 million visitors, while Disneyland saw 12 million. This extreme lack of guests could be attributed to the severe lack of attractions. The park did not have any notable dark rides except for the Superstar Limo, which lasted less than a year before it closed down. The park was in shambles, and it needed an e-ticket attraction to bring in more guests. It was decided that a clone of the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror would be put into Disney's California Adventure. On May 5, 2004, the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror opened in Disney's California Adventure to a generally positive reception. The ride's story followed the exact same premise as Florida's version, but due to budget and land reasons, California's version of the ride was forced to cut many of the effects used in Florida's version.
It wasn't as elaborate of an attraction, so I don't think it wasn't to that level. But I was there opening night and there were fireworks shooting off the attraction. It was a huge thing.
Instead of the long, winding gardens of Florida's outdoor queue, the queue for California's is just a giant cattle pen, with seemingly endless switchbacks. California's ride system was also much simpler, as it removed the fifth dimension scene entirely, replacing it with the mirror scene. While it still delivered a terrifying experience, it only had one drop sequence with 6 drops. On the plus side, the ride had a higher capacity as it utilized 3 elevator shafts, while Florida's only has 2. While still an enjoyable experience, California's version of the Tower of Terror was more often than not viewed as an inferior clone to the ride in Florida. Tokyo DisneySea, the second of the 2 Disney parks located at the Disney Tokyo Resort, is viewed by many as not just the best Disney park, but the very best theme park in the world. The park's gorgeous scenery, groundbreaking, well-maintained attractions, and relatively low ticket prices have allowed it to maintain its stellar reputation for over 20 years. Tokyo DisneySea opened in 2001 with a lineup of attractions that is hard to beat. Rides such as Journey to the Center of the Earth, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Indiana Jones, and more. A few years after the debut, a new thrill ride was promised to open in the American waterfront area of the park, themed to 18th century New York. This ride would be the very unique Japanese version of the Tower of Terror. To fit in with the early 20th century New York theme of the waterfront, Imagineers designed the facade of the tower to resemble Moorish Revival architecture. In Japan, the Twilight Zone TV show is not widely known by the public, hence why a new original story was created to accommodate to the Japanese parkgoers. The story follows the character Harrison Hightower, played by Disney Imagineer Joe Rohde. Hightower is a greedy, manipulative treasure hunter who stole an ancient idol named Shiriki Utundu from a tribe in the Congo. After Harrison returned to his hotel in New York, the Hotel Hightower, to celebrate his newest acquisition, he entered the elevator that took him to his penthouse. On the ride up, the idol came to life and cursed Hightower and the hotel. The elevator came crashing down, and when the dust settled, Hightower was nowhere to be seen, and all that remained in the elevator was the cursed idol. The guests enter the Hotel Hightower in the present day as it has been reopened for tours. This original story keeps guests on their toes from start to finish. The outdoor and indoor queue have some architectural differences, however they generally have the same layout as California's version. Now, Japan's pre-show ditches the television screen for a haunted piece of glass. Trust me, it's cooler than it sounds. You listen to an old recording of Hightower's final moments when his spirit warns guests to turn back before they suffer the same fate as him. The pre-show ends with Shiriki Utundu disappearing before the guests' eyes, a really neat effect. Once guests enter the elevator, Harrison Hightower's ghost warns them to leave or they will suffer the same fate as he did. The elevator rises to Hightower's penthouse, and a sequence similar to the hallway scene plays out, with Hightower being thrown down the elevator shaft and the room fading into a star field. Next, the elevator rises to the mirror scene, which is nearly identical to California's. However, the guest reflections turn green instead of blue, and Shiriki Utundu appears and lunges at the elevator. This causes the elevator to rise to the 13th floor where the drop sequence begins. Japan's standard drop sequence only has 4 drops. It's like a shortened version of California's. Another notable distinction between Japan's tower and the other towers is that Japan uses over-the-shoulder seatbelts similar to a car. Many point out that this causes the floating sensation to feel less intense. Overall, Japan's Tower of Terror is more so praised for its incredible original story and effects rather than its thrill factor. I don't want to spend too much time discussing the development of the original version of Tower of Terror in Paris, as there is not much to talk about. The ride opened on December 22, 2007, in the very controversial Walt Disney Studios Park, located at the Paris Disney Resort. Paris's version uses the exact same blueprints as California, and is virtually identical, the only difference being that the ride is in French.
Par une nuit d'orage il y a fort longtemps, 5 personnes passèrent les portes d'un ascenseur pour vivre un cauchemar.
If requested, the ride's narration could be switched to English. This is not the end of Paris's story, and we'll come back to it a little later. Congratulations, you have made it to the bonus segment where we talk about a very strange off-brand version of the Tower of Terror. Let's quickly turn our attention to Movieland Studios, an Italian theme park located near the city of Verona. This park boasts a very strange selection of attractions. and among them is one of the few remaining Intamin first-gen freefalls. Named the Hollywood Action Tower, this ride opened in 2006 and is probably the final first-gen freefall that will ever open. The ride features a 131-foot drop and a top speed of 55 miles per hour. The ride has a very familiar Hollywood Tower sign at the top of the drop shaft, and while on the ride for whatever reason, the Twilight Zone theme plays once the ride vehicles reach the top of the tower. It is interesting to see a ride that is effectively what an early concept for Florida's tower looks like put into practice. Now that we have discussed the development of all the Towers of Terror, it's now time to look at the changes they went through during the 2010s, starting with Florida's Summer Nightastic overlay. The Summer Nightastic event began at the Disneyland Resort in 2009 as a celebration of summer. The park underwent some seasonal changes, and the following year the celebration was brought to the Walt Disney World Resort. During the celebration, some attractions underwent changes to enhance the ride experience. One of these attractions was the Tower of Terror, that received a new drop sequence that temporarily replaced the randomized sequences. This temporary sequence eliminated Rod Serling's final spiel before the drop, and instead replaced it with soothing jazz music. The music would abruptly cut out and the elevator would drop. This drop sequence only had about 4 drops. However, the updated audio, especially definitely sat well with guests. The final addition with this drop sequence was that the ride photo taken at the top of the tower would be displayed on the television screen before the ending projection. As cool as this update was, it only lasted for about a few months and has not returned since 2010. Let's head back to Japan to experience the best thing to happen to this ride since it opened, Level 13. Tower of Terror Level 13 is a seasonal update that happens every year from January to April. The event began in 2012 to attract more guests during spring break. The overlay adds 2 additional drop sequences to the ride. Level 13, which has 5 drops, and Shadow of Shiriki with 7 drops. The newly added drop sequences are unique in their own right, with Level 13 adding drops between the show scenes and Shadow of Shiriki adding a brand new scene entirely. For a few years, each tower remained unchanged until 2016, where at the San Diego Comic-Con, a shocking announcement was made. Yes, that's right, California's Tower of Terror would close and be rethemed to Guardians of the Galaxy. The announcement enraged fans, and many immediately despised the decision, myself included.
I went during that time where it was closing, and it was sad. It was.
The ride was slated to close early 2017, but Disney made sure to leave guests with something special. Starting in September of 2016 and lasting until the ride's closure, every day at Twilight, the Tower of Terror went into complete darkness for what was known as late checkout. This overlay cut out all the show scenes, cut much of the ride's narration, and left riders in complete darkness, waiting in silence for the drop.
But this time, it's opening for you.
Oh, good.
Oh, hell no!
This event was extremely popular, and it marked the end of an era for California Adventure, since after the closure of Tower of Terror, a large slew of closures and rethemes began. Finally, the dreaded day came.
They're coming! No! No!
On its final operating day, the Tower of Terror saw huge crowds and a 3-hour wait time by the end of the night. On January 2nd, 2017, the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror at Disney's California Adventure checked in its final guests and went out in complete darkness.
Goodbye, Tower of Terror! Goodbye!
of the quickest turnarounds ever, Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout opened its doors just 5 months after Tower of Terror's closure on May 27, 2017. The ride was received surprisingly well, considering just a few months prior, hundreds were ready to boycott the park entirely. On its opening day, the ride saw 5-hour wait times, and people were loving it. The general story of the ride goes as follows. Tannelir Tavon, an eccentric collector, traps the Guardians of the Galaxy in his massive collection of rare relics. The riders are welcomed into his fortress to be given an exclusive tour of his collection and see the Guardians of the Galaxy on display for the first time. Rocket Raccoon escapes and recruits the riders to help him break out the other Guardians by raising their hands for security clearance. Once aboard the gantry lift, Rocket jumps on top of the lift and starts the music, and the breakout begins. The ride experience begins from the very controversial show building. For an extravagant space fortress, the tower looks stunning. For a ride blending into a Hollywood-themed land, not all that flattering. As guests enter the queue, they hear various audio tracks from the Tavon collection. Unlike the Tower of Terror, which gave riders only one ride experience every time, Mission Breakout was fitted with an updated ride system that could accommodate 6 drop profiles with varying amounts of drops. The drop sequence is executed to one of 6 songs, with I Want You Back by the Jackson 5 having the most with 9 drops. Immediately shoots the ride vehicle up the tower, and throughout the ride experience, the elevator never comes to a complete stop. Each drop sequence has a total of 4 show scenes, these being the generator room, 2 screen-based scenes that change depending on the song, and the ending scene, where you are bid farewell and drop one final time. The rethemed attraction is now arguably more popular than the Tower of Terror ever was. I won't say outright that either ride is better than the other, because they are very different experiences. The Tower of Terror built suspense before the drop, and worked to genuinely scare guests at the expense of some thrill, while Guardians of the Galaxy maximizes thrill and excitement over fear and suspense. However, Guardians of the Galaxy has one exception. If for whatever reason you are unsatisfied with how re-rideable Guardians of the Galaxy is, Imagineers threw in one more special version on ride just for you. During the Halloween season of 2017, just a few months after its grand opening, Guardians of the Galaxy received a new overlay called Monsters After Dark. As the name suggests, this overlay is activated in the afternoons until closing and features monsters. This overlay features completely unique show scenes and an original song made by Tyler Bates, who scored the first 2 Guardians of the Galaxy films. The drop sequence is identical to the Born to be Wild ride profile and features 7 drops. Riders may hear a familiar metal clang sound effect at the end of the ride, a subtle nod to the Tower of Terror. If anything, this version of the ride is even more loved than the original due to its creativity and incredible environmental storytelling. In 2019, Paris's Tower of Terror was reimagined to a new dimension of chills. This controversial update changed the attraction significantly. The original single drop sequence with a suspenseful build-up was completely removed in favor of 3 new drop sequences. Rather than Rod Serling, guests would be guided through the ride by Sally Shine, the little girl seen in the pre-show. Each drop sequence is assigned to its respective elevator shaft, as they all tell different stories. Elevator Shaft Alpha has the Malevolent Machine profile, which has 9 drops and is the closest to the original, as it still has the hallway scene where the ghosts are electrocuted. It does not have a clear story other than a bunch of spooky noises and intense dropping. Shaft Bravo features the Shaft creatures, which has 7 drops, and features a surprisingly cohesive original story. While it has nothing to do with the Twilight Zone, Sally Shine warns guests about evil creatures in the elevator shaft that sound a whole lot like Shiriki Utundu from Japan. There is one extremely standout moment from this story, being the second show scene, during which Sally Shine ominously tells riders,
"Whatever you do, don't scream."
Finally, in Shaft Charlie, riders can experience the 5th dimension drop sequence. This story can pretty much be summed up as Imagineers testing out every colored light they could find. Many problems came with these changes, mainly being the fact that the Twilight Zone theme does not work as well anymore. For some reason, the normal pre-show is played in the library, but once you're on the ride, the story has nothing to do with what has been set up. Another thing, if you speak both French and English, you hear Sally Shine say the same thing twice. This version has many flaws. The ride tried to be scarier by adding more drops and filling it with horror cliches, while forgetting what made this ride scary in the first place: suspense. Guardians of the Galaxy's formula works on that ride because it's not meant to necessarily scare guests, it is meant for excitement and thrill. So overall, a new dimension of chills, change for the sake of change, innovation for the sake of innovation. While still delivering a terrifying experience, one can't help but wonder why the original story was cut and what the fate of this attraction will be. That brings us to today, with 3 operating Towers of Terror and 1 Guardians of the Galaxy that span 3 different continents that will continue to terrify guests for years to come. But what's coming next? Will there be another ride like this? The answer is yes, probably. In late 2024, at the D23 Expo, an expansion was revealed for Hong Kong Disneyland that would bring more Marvel attractions into the park. One of these rides is slated to be a Tower of Terror style drop ride themed to Spider-Man. Not much else is known about the attraction other than that Doc Ock is supposed to be the main villain in the ride. While this expansion probably won't happen for another 5 to 10 years, it is exciting to get a glimpse of what lies ahead for the future of these unique drop rides. From Florida to California, Tokyo to Paris, the Tower of Terror has continually pushed the boundaries of storytelling, thrills, and innovation in the theme park world. It all started with that first drop, an unforgettable moment that set the stage for one of the most iconic series of themed rides in the world. Thank you for joining me on this journey beyond the 5th dimension, through the past, present, and future. And now you know the complete and unaltered history of Disney's greatest thrill attraction, the Tower of Terror.